Padmanabhapuram Palace is one of the existing, oldest and largest existing wooden palaces, not only in our country, but in the entire world. The word Padmanabha actually come from God Vishnu, who is the principal deity of the rulers of southern Kerala dynasty. Earlier it was called Venad, and since mid 18th century, they renamed it as Thiruvidankod or Thiruvidankur, anglicized to be called as Travancore. Padmanabha literally means the god from whose navel comes out a lotus. Padmam is lotus, Nabhi is the navel, the umbilical cord. So the god from whose navel comes out the lotus flower. There is a big temple built by these kings in their later capital, Trivandrum, and since mid 18th century, he is the king of the southern Kerala kingdom of Travancore. Padmanabhapuram, as I mentioned, was their earlier capital and their palace, which belongs to the almost to the southern tip of our country, very close to the Cape Comorin, which is the southern tip of our country. Hardly about 45 minutes drive from Kanyakumari, you can reach to this palace. The nearest airport or a major station, railway station, is Thiruvananthapuram or Trivandrum, which is the capital of Kerala. It's about an hour and 45 minutes you can reach to this place. Many have been there. It is a big complex of buildings, even though we now call it as one Padmanabhapuram Palace. It's actually inside a complex boundary. There's a complex of buildings were constructed by various kings of Travancore during their tenure. It started from mid 16th century and ended at the end of 18th century. You can see several blocks of building here. Each one has an open central courtyard. This is a typical style of architecture existed in Kerala among the upper caste rich homes, because the rule of succession was matrilineal and matriarchal. So everyone in the family need to have a room or a space to live in, and each of these rooms should be provided with sunlight and good air supply. So they always had an open courtyard in the center, and rooms are built around the courtyard. That is a traditional architecture. These buildings are also built in the same style of the Naluketta, that is the local name for this style of architecture. This is how it looks from with an aerial view of the palace complex. As I told you, each of these buildings here are built not by the same king or not at the same time, but it's all been built and added to the complex by various different kings during their time. Most of the major construction happened from almost second quarter of 18th century, when the most popular king of this dynasty, who extended the kingdom to a larger area, which he was in charge. What I'm going to do today is not going into much of the architecture or styles, but I'm going to take you into this palace as you really walk inside on your normal visits. Thiruvidampur or Travancore had certain distinctions in Indian history or even in world history. The first Indian ruler to defeat an European force in a direct battle were the Marthandavarma Anizham Thirunal of Travancore in 1747, defeating the Dutch. Not only he defeated the Dutch, he took the Dutch Navy soldiers and their captain, and later Captain de Lannoy became the trainer of the Travancore forces. They also were the first to invite the British to get into Kerala soil by providing them the right to do trade in, and also allowed them to build a fort in Anjutenga or Anjangu. Once we got independence, again Travancore was in the news because among the few of the Indian kings who did not want to join either Indian Union or Pakistan. In fact, Travancore declared that they want to be an independent state called an American model state. But of course, the national movement of Kerala resisted that decision of the king, and the king had to change finally and join Indian Union. 1956, when the state reunion was organized, Kerala was formed. Most of the parts of Travancore, Kochi, and the northern province called Malabar under the British were joined to form the state of Kerala. From the present, at the time of the Travancore, they have taken off the place where we are going to visit, and the rest of the places like Kanyakumari, which was part of now made part of Tamil Nadu. And 1957, the new state which is formed brought into a new political culture to the world by democratically electing a communist government. Kerala speaks a very unique language called Malayalam. A visitor, as you come in, it is actually a few kilometers deviation from the Kanyakumari Trivandrum National Highway, a place called Takkalai. Just a few kilometers deviation, you can come to the palace. Since the palace belonged to the Keralite, present Keralite rulers, the palace complex is still managed by the Kerala Archaeology Department. As you enter, you will come into this big courtyard. Since these palace floors are made with special ingredients, the preservers want to keep that intact. This palace permits only visitors without their shoes on. So if when things were ready, and if you are coming to visit, you may please bring an extra pair of socks for you to walk inside without a pair of shoes. And this courtyard, you will see, you can see my cursor where this is the main entrance of the palace complex. And this place where you will find, this is on top of that gate is the old guard room. This is from here, anybody who is entering through the gate or this area can be watched. And this again is very special kind of ventilation and a window system which is typical to Kerala. You may not be able to see anyone standing inside here, but the person who is standing inside can see what is happening from outside. And as you enter through this entrance, this is again the aerial view. Once you get in, this is a view from that guard room. This is the entrance. As you enter, this is the first building which come across. This is a 16th century building built by one of the popular kings of that time, Veera Udaya Marthandavarma, who made this as the place to receive his guests. So anyone who is visiting this palace will be received by the king at this entrance. And you will also see a clock as you enter on your left side, you see this old clock. This is a clock which used to be the timekeeper of the entire palace and the fort surrounding. Almost 2 kilometers area, the ring of the hourly bell, the ring from this clock was heard. In fact, in 1987, this was repaired with a lot of difficulty by one of the expert technicians from Trivandrum. In fact, they use a technique which is having pulleys and ropes and heavy stones, which can be wound for a week. Every hour there was a bell which rang to alert people of allowing them to know the timings. As you enter into the first veranda of the Pumukham, the entrance where the king used to receive his guests, the first thing what you will notice is the ceiling. The ceiling is carved with 56 designs, different floral designs. Remember, this part of the world where this palace is one of the thick forested tropical area, and wood was abundantly available at that time. So they use immensely the woodwork in decorating their palaces, unlike the colorful, beautiful palaces you see elsewhere. And also you will see a horseman lamp hanging from the ceiling in the center of the veranda. This is a special kind of lamp which is hanging on a chain, which you can turn this lamp after putting a wick and light it. You can turn it into any direction. It will stay on the direction where the wick is being kept. Because normally when you hang something in a chain, with the center of gravity, it will rotate back to this original position. But it has got a special chain with a point where it may stay to the place where it is turned to. And this horseman lamp is a symbol of bravery. And the next thing what you see in the veranda, what is displayed now, see, remember this palace after independence has become a museum. So I'm just showing what is displayed now, not in the time of the royalties. These are a couple of exhibits in the palace. This is actually a chair which is used by the royalties, gifted by the Chinese traders. Kerala had a very ancient trade with China for spices and other items of trade. And Chinese were in all Kerala ports bringing so many things to us, as well as taking back the spices and other commodities like ivory, sandalwood, etc. So this is one of the gifts by the Chinese traders. And on the right, you will see a stone court. This stone court is called summer court. In fact, it is polished granites on the top surface, and at the bottom surface is rough surface. During summertime, the moisture in the air is absorbed by the rough surface at the bottom, and the polished surface on the top, which actually don't absorb heat, but it radiates heat away. So the king can have a cool seat when he is using that during the summertime. It is a summer court. As you move to your left on the veranda, you will see these beautiful bows, ceremonial bows. These are called Onaville. Kerala's most popular harvest festival comes in August, September every year, called Onam. During that time, the local chieftains used to bring these colorfully painted wooden bows, which is painted with vegetable dye colors, the mural colors, paintings of Lord Vishnu as Padmanabha or as young Krishna is brought by the chieftains and presented to the king, which is also displayed in that place. This is how it is, Lord Vishnu with the Padmanabha position, on like reclining on his snake, Ananta. As you enter from there, using a very narrow staircase on the left-hand corner of that veranda, you will come to the first floor of that building, which is the cabinet chamber. You can see in that photograph itself, the floor is shining like black marble. This is the speciality of this palace. That's why we are not allowed to use shoes while you enter to visit this temple, the palace, sorry. Because the floor is made of certain very special ingredients of that time. It is used with shell lime, very fine river sand, white of the eggs, tender coconut water, shell charcoal, and some herbals like tinctoria, Terminelia cerbula, which are good against rheumatism and other kind of problems, diseases. So this is actually a medicinal floor, which is shining like marble at that time. And this was a cabinet chamber, or time when the king had some dignitaries, he used to have meetings here. Behind you can see those colorful windows. They are not glass, they are painted or colored micas. And you can see the wooden seats or wooden bench like thing here, but these are wooden boxes with small cabins where they put vegetable and sprinkle water, which is actually another technology to bring down the heat and a nice aroma in the cabin. It was like natural air conditioning at that time. I mentioned about these kind of grills in the verandas and also washrooms. You cannot see anyone who is inside the building, but you can see what is happening from outside. Also, it brings just enough light to the room and a good ventilation. And as you enter, when you leave that cabinet room, there is a small little veranda will take you to one of the longest buildings in this palace complex. In fact, traditionally, we had a belief that our sins are forgiven when you make the Brahmins happy. Our Travancore kings were also not an exception. Being a king, you may do a lot of sins and you want to get the sins forgiven. So they used to feed 2,000 Brahmins every day by serving an excellent lunch. So this is one of the halls. This is actually a two-storied building having huge teak wood beams to support the roof, and they used to provide a 1,000 Brahmins here and another 1,000 on the ground floor. They all traditionally serve a lunch on the banana leaf. And now one of the corner of this hall, you will find some of the Chinese oil jars. These oil jars remind us of the old Chinese trade, because Chinese traders, when they come here for their trade, they used to store their oil for their own purpose. By the time, after several months of travel, they reach here, many of these jars were empty. So taking off empty jars back is no use. So what they used to do, they used to sell this on barter in our place, our market. So these are Chinese oil jars, and since they need a lot of pickles to feed these Brahmins every day, in this palace the jars were believed to be used to keep the pickles for serving the Brahmins. This is a view of the two-story dining hall. This is the ground floor where you saw the jars, and this is the upper floor. These are the two-storied big long halls in which the dining. Of course, the roof is now modified into tile roof. Earlier it was with coconut leaf thatching. As we come out from the dining hall, which you see on the left, this long building, what you see is the theater of the palace complex, which is actually just behind the first veranda, the Pumukham, what we enter. Earlier days, they used to conduct theatrical programs like concerts and dramas and Kathakali and other art forms. And now it is actually used as a small museum with some of the exhibits are from various Kaval, the snake temples, etc. And when you come out of this building, you will see another big building. This is called the Mother Palace, which is actually the oldest building in this building complex, built in the 16th century, which is called the Mother Palace or Thai Kottaram. It's a two-story building, and which is actually having the most intricate carvings in decorating the ceilings, the roof, and the entrance and doors even. Like when we construct a building, we used to have a foundation stone laid at we call as a sacred corner of the land. When this palace complex was first built, this was the sacred corner where they laid the foundation pillar. This is made of jackfruit tree, Atrocarpus wood, and which is of the most intricately carved pillars of the palace complex. It is, you can find some of the inlay works of rings inside these knobs, which they say that it has been carved inside without, it is not added later, it is carved within the frame. So an excellent example of how fine carpenters and sculptors, wood sculptors we had those days in Kerala. And this particular room, as you enter into that Mother Palace, also was used for their religious rituals and prayers. Again, the ceiling of that room, beautiful floral designs are decorating. And when we enter from that room, the next room, you will see that open courtyard. Remember, I mentioned about the four-cornered housing system, which used to be the system of architecture among the landlords and the Maharajas. And around this open courtyard is all those rooms were built, because this area will provide good sunlight, good aeration. It is not to store water, because when raining, because Kerala have a lot of water, when raining there is drainages which take the water straight away out. It is never permitted to do any water logging at that time. Also, it is said that the royal ladies and children used to have use this place as their playground and a chit-chat place. Being matriarchal system created a lot of challenges within the family, because the succession was not from father to son, not from the king to his son, because the ownership title was only for the women. It was from mother to daughter. So the next king will be the nephew of the king. The king's sister's elder son used to be the next king. So there were a lot of family feuds within the system. So you can see there is a wooden door on the floor, which is now newly made. There is an underground tunnel which goes up to a mile away into another palace called Charu. But of course, this tunnel is blocked because of it has been abandoned for more than a century when this palace was made into a museum. But you can see a flight of steps which goes down, and you can go to a few meters in, and it is said that it is for the kings and their family to escape just in case of an emergency, that the palace is in trouble, in attack. You can see another view from the Mother Palace. So it's the extensive use of teak wood being employed in the construction of these buildings. And when you come out of the Mother Palace, there are some beautiful, every door has some beautifully carved metal chains and locks. As we come out of this building, you will see the oldest of this building and the tallest of the building in this complex. This is called the Uparika Malika, or the multi-story building of this palace. This is a 4-story building. The ground floor, where you don't find any windows, ventilation down up here from this level down, was used as the treasury of the palace. All the wealth was stored once there. And up here, you will see a window. That's the first floor of the building. That was the Maharaja's bedroom. And the second floor was Maharaja's prayer room. And the topmost floor, which is the most decorated room in this entire complex, painted with a lot of mural paintings on the wall, and was called as the divine chamber, where they believed that the presiding deity of the family, Lord Vishnu, stays in that room. Unfortunately, we may not go up to that close. You can only go to the ground, and you can only go to the first floor of this building. But before we go there, you will see a small little pillar with a stone on top. Travancore, after mid 18th century, decided to have a very strong army. In fact, the king who took power in 1729, Marthandavarma, until that time, this was not a very big country. It was only a small principality under the Vijayanagar Empire. But when, after the Vijayanagar Empire is gone, the Venad kings were independent. And when Marthandavarma took over, he decided first to ensure that he is safe from all his family enemies and to expand his kingdom. And he decided to have a very strong army. Before that, many of the kings, they never had a trained army under them. They used to hire from the local chieftains. And that is how the wars they fought. But Marthandavarma decided to have his own force, and he had a direct recruitment system to recruit soldiers into his army. So you can see a little window up here. This is from there Marthandavarma used to watch the recruitment of his soldiers. You can see the little pillar and a stone on top. This stone on top is like a half circle. It is weighing about 38 kilograms, which will be kept on the ground. Anyone who wants to join the army will have to lift this from the ground, lift it up his head 101 times. That is to prove his physical strength. That is how and also remember, the king himself watched the recruitment directly, so that no bribing was possible to get a job. And since 1800, this palace was abandoned and the treasury was shifted to Trivandrum. The ground floor, this treasury is empty and not open. But we will go to the first floor where the Maharaja's bedroom is located. This is the Maharaja's bedroom, which is on the first floor. You can see that window which I was mentioning, where the Maharaja used to personally supervise the recruitment. You will see again this coat in this room is again another very special thing. This was gifted by the Dutch East India Company to the Travancore king Marthandavarma. There is actually a carving of the Dutch medical emblem here, the eagle and the snake. And you can see on the coat, the plate, the sheet is made of 64 pieces of medicinal trees, which is called a medicinal coat. It is believed that if you sleep on this coat daily, you will not get many of the diseases. You may wonder, the Maharaja did not have a beautiful, soft, bed, but they used to believe that sleeping on hard surfaces is good for the body. So they had used this coat because it's a medicinal coat. As I mentioned, on the top floor of this building, the third floor, on the highest level, it is called the Divine Chamber, where now no visitors are permitted for several years now. The wall is painted with beautiful mural paintings depicting the stories of Vishnu. And there is an ever-lighted lamp since 1750. After making his kingdom expanded to almost close to Kochi, almost up to Alapi, the present Alapi, the king Martandavarma wanted to ensure his kingdom thereafter should not have much threats from within his family and from within the country. He was a very clever king. He knew that the biggest fear of people is God. So he decided to dedicate his kingdom to the king, to the god Lord Vishnu, to their principal deity in Trivandrum, Lord Padmanabha. Those who have been to Trivandrum knows there's a big temple there where the principal deity is Lord Vishnu as Padmanabha. So he went to the temple, and in a ceremony called Trippadidanam, where he dedicated his power, the symbol of power, his sword, to the god's idol, and declared that hereafter the king of Tiruvidankur is Lord Vishnu, and he and his successors will rule this place as the servant of God. Padmanabhadasa, that is a title for all the kings thereafter. It is actually a big political decision too, because all the wealth is stored in the temple. So it is not easy for someone in the country to give any kind of threat to the temple, because people were very God-fearing. That's one reason, one way Martandavarma ensured that the rest of his successors will have a much more peaceful rule. As we come out of this Upparika Maliga, we enter to the ladies' chambers. As I told you, the women of Travancore, Kerala in general, used to be the only owners of all wealth. So the owner of the kingdom was the mother of the palace. Since the kings were not having official wives, the queen of the palace is the mother of the king, the queen mother. So in a Keralite palace, we say queen's bedroom is the queen mother's bedroom. Beautiful paintings of Lord Krishna and his young childhood stories are being displayed in all the walls of these rooms. They are not wall paintings, but they are photographs. This is the bedroom of the queen mother. Remember those days, no electricity. They lived a very simple life when you consider the Maharajas in the modern times, later period. They had a very simple life, a small room where you can see a cot and inside that building. These are some of the costumes of the royal ladies those days. And as you proceed in the ladies' chamber, once you pass through the next buildings, you will come across the armory halls. This is one of the rooms where they kept their armory inside. And you can see the corridors where you can see one side, good ventilation of air and light is provided. That is how all the rooms. But this room, you can see there is no windows because it's an armory hall. And this is a view from outside, from the street. This is actually, as you almost complete the ladies' areas, you will find this projection outside the building onto the street. Because annually there is a big chariot festival, and the ladies of the palace, this is a place where they can watch the rituals and the procession from the temple. And they are not being seen by others, but they can see what happens from outside. You can see this is the secretariat of the palace. This is actually adjoining to the ladies' chamber. There is, after that, public audience hall for the ladies, or the viewing gallery of the ladies, the secretariat building starts. You can see these small windows up there. There is folding desks where they can use to sit on the ground and write their records. And the next is again the open gallery for the Maharajas to see the chariot festival. Also, this is the public audience hall in this palace. Traditionally, all Indian kings ensured that at least twice a year there will be public audience, so that the public can come directly and give their grievances directly to the king, in order to avoid any kind of middlemen. So this was the place the king also had his public audience, as well as he used to watch the religious rituals and the processions from the temple through the street. Next room is the portrait gallery, where the different important incidents of these royalties are being shown in different paintings. There are so many small paintings are being displayed. One of the most important one is the one which happened in the mid 18th century, the King Marthandavarma defeating the Dutch and making the Dutch captain de Lannoy to surrender. And he became a good friend of the king later on, and helped Travancore to build a strong army, a strong force. And Marthandavarma was equally thankful to him. When he died in Travancore, he was buried with all the official, tributes given. And it is also next to the palace, still a Delanoy memorial is still there. And we leave the portrait hall, we get into another building, which is again connected to this, but it is a totally different style of architecture. So far we have seen the small corridors and the rooms without much big windows and doors. But this one is not meant for the king, but for the European guests, especially the British, were there later in that time of Dharmaraja, after Marthandavarma. So they built a guest house called Indravilasam, which has got all modern facilities, having a toilet, having a big staircase, a big airy and big windows and doors. In fact, if you go to many of the Keralite palaces, even those who have been to the Kochi palace, you may be notice that you will find very narrow and steep staircases and short and narrow doors inside the building. It's actually a natural security system in order to prevent a group attack by a group of soldiers trying to rush into the building. Because if it is a small door with a high doorstep, like you can see here, the high doorstep you can see here. If anyone who has to pull up his sword from the case and charging into the room, he will be hit by all these sides. And a couple of soldiers can stop such kind of movement. That is actually, most of the Keralite palaces have very steep staircases, narrow staircases, and narrow doors, and less windows. This is another view of the Indravilasam palace. This is the toilet, which is also an attached toilet. We'll see in the palace, the guest house, and a very wide, big, not so steep staircase, which goes down the ground floor veranda and the floor. This is how the veranda. You can see the big difference in architectural style, where the earlier one, a lot of wood, small staircase, small verandas, not so big open areas. But here you find a big veranda with beautiful shiny white pillars. Again, those who have been to the Madurai Palace, Tirumalai Nayak Palace, you might have heard that those pillars were shining like white marble, even though they are made with shell lime. Same shiny white marble like plasters are used in this pillars. This is how you see this guest house from outside. When you come out of this guest house, walk through the back side of the palace complex. The first thing you notice is this little pond and the Maharaja's bath. In fact, there is a pond where the water is brought from mineral water channels from the Western Ghats Mountains, just behind this palace complex. and there is a drainage system, the excess water will run out all the time. Will maintain always a fresh water. Of course, don't look at the present color of the water because it has not been maintained and there is no Maharaja yet. And you see, this is the first floor of the building. This is the Maharaja's oil bath place. Before a bath, he used to have an oil massage, a traditional oil massage, and then come down here to have his bath. This is a typical oil bath, which is given. This is actually not a king, somebody now, but this is how it was being given to the kings. On the right side of the pond, you will see this is the royal kitchen, and here there is by the side of the pond there is a well through which the water is drawn to the kitchen directly. This is inside the kitchen. This is where the grinders, as I told you, hundreds of people were fed daily, so they need a big kitchen. So these are the big stone grinders. This is a place where they used to store the curries and water, and this is where they draw the water from the well. And from here we are going to the last part of the palace complex, which is totally built out of granite. Even though, as I mentioned, is a big palace complex, the entire complex so far we have seen extensive use of wood, but the final building which we are going to see is totally built of granite in the typical Tamil style. You can see the entrance where we entered through this area. This is the clock tower which was there near the Pumukham. And this is typically a Tamil style, the Dravidian style mandapa, which is meant for all kinds of religious and cultural performances. This is called the Navaratri Mandapa, the special 9-night festival which comes part of Dasara in the east, Durga Puja time. Here we call it Navaratri. All the festivities were conducted here. If you can look little up on the ceiling, just at the corner, you can look at my cursor. There are few holes. This is actually a viewing place for the royal servant ladies. Actually, they were not allowed to come and sit in front, cannot be seen by others. So they can sit down on the ground and look through these holes to watch the performance on the ground. And to the left, on the ground, in the hall itself, there is a wooden cage through which the royal ladies, the queen mother and the senior ladies of the family will watch the program. Only the male officers and the Maharaja will be present along with the artists in the hall. You can see straight up there is a small gate door that used to be the temple of goddess Saraswati, the goddess of literature. And this hall, as I mentioned, is used for cultural performances, and this is the wooden structure meant for the royal ladies to watch the program. And there you can see there is a little openings which can be which has a flap, by which the ladies can lift up the flap and offer the gifts, the presents to the artists who perform. The last king, in fact, only one king after the Marthandavarma, who made this kingdom very big, used this palace, which is Dharmaraja. It's actually the longest serving king of this dynasty. He ruled more than 40 years. And this big palace was abandoned by him. And he built new palace in Trivandrum, which is about a couple of hours away from here, very close to the big temple. In fact, there is a story behind why he left. During his time, in the 1790s, there was a big threat of attack from Tipu Sultan to Kerala. In fact, Tipu came almost up to Kochi, and he was ready to advance further to Travancore, because Travancore at that time was an ally of the British. So many North Indian kings who were afraid, North Kerala kings, who were afraid of the advancement of Tipu, took refuge in Travancore, which was the strongest, richest, and strong ally of the British. And one of them was one of the princes from the Samarin of Calicut. She was an extremely talented lady, a good musician and a scholar. King Dharmaraja had an audience with her once, and he fallen in love with her. He actually started frequenting from this palace to almost couple of hours. Those days, remember, there's no quick transport. You had to use the horse carriage. So maybe it took more than 4 or 5 hours or even a day. So he has to frequent. So finally he decided, I don't want to go every week or every month such a long journey. I'm going to shift my palace to Trivandrum and settle there so that he can see and meet this lady there. Thereafter, from 1800, this palace was abandoned. All the wealth was moved out of this palace, and he built a new palace close to the temple of Trivandrum, where the family deity is there. This is the princess. It is not a real one. It is only an assumption by an artist how she might have looked like. This is the Trivandrum, the old palace complex, and the temple there is one of the scenes of the king having their annual procession after the capital was shifted to Trivandrum. And now this palace is used as a religious purpose apart from the museum. This is one of the religious festival during the nine-night festival to start the procession to Trivandrum. And with that, this is the present palace which they made in Trivandrum in the model of the Buckingham Palace. Remember, Travancore kings were one of the most richest kings of the country, which we all did not know until recently, when the big treasury of the Padmanabha Swami temple in Trivandrum was half exposed. Still more to come from there. With that, I end my presentation. I hope you all enjoyed this presentation, and I'm very proud that I am also a proud member of this team, which is completing our first anniversary on this platform. And thank you all.
Thank you, Jaya.